Hi there, my name is Kristen Obeid, and I'm the Weed Management Specialist for Horticulture Crops with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. Thanks for joining me. In this presentation, I'll be speaking about the importance of scouting for weeds after a herbicide application. Now, the majority of the slides in this presentation came from the Weed Science Society of America Teaching and Education Tools. The importance of scouting. Many factors can contribute to the presence of weeds in the field after a herbicide application and later in the growing season. Scouting is the only way to know which weeds are present, and their patterns in the field can help to understand why they are present. Scouting will be helpful in documenting changes in the weed population that occur over time in response to land management practices, including the evolution of herbicide-resistant weeds. Changes in crop and weed management practices based on scouting help to maximize crop yield and profitability by reducing weed competition, reduce weed seed production, maximize remedial management tactics within the same growing season. Scouting after a herbicide application. Begin scouting 7 to 14 days after each herbicide application and continue at regular intervals until harvest. Move across the field in a scouting pattern, covering the area. You can see on the right here, we have various scouting patterns that can be used. In each area where you stop, observe and record the weed species. Proper identification is important. Spatial patterns, if present, of weeds across the field. Weed densities or numbers. The presence of live and dead weeds. And if there's any herbicide symptomology on the live weeds. If weeds are present after an application, determine the reason. Does it have something to do with field history? For example, was this species in the field last year and was it found to be resistant? The weed biology. Have you basically sprayed the weed too late? Environment. Was there rain right after application? Application problems. Was the sprayer calibrated correctly? Crop cultural practices. Was the previous crop underseeded to clover? And herbicide resistance. Investigate and rule out all of these other factors affecting herbicide performance before you suspect herbicide resistance. This is very important. Here's a checklist for scouting. Scout 7 to 14 days after each herbicide application and near harvest. Identify and record the weed species present. Determine the distribution pattern of the plants in the field. Correlate with the application pattern or identify it as random. Determine if plants present survived a previously applied herbicide or emerged after the last herbicide application. For example, are the plants large and have a little bit of herbicide symptomology, which could look like burn or necrotic spots on the plant? Or are they very small, just emerging from the soil? Observe individual plant responses, especially if plants survived a herbicide application. Look at the previous field history to understand what changes may be occurring. Here, for example, is a hot spot or an area of the field where there's still a lot of weeds present after a herbicide application. And then when you pull out the weeds, you can see there's various levels of control from the herbicide. So there's some tolerant weeds in the population. Perhaps this is a resistance situation. In conclusion, scouting fields to determine the reasons for weed survival after herbicide application is important. Field history, weed biology, environment, application parameters, crop cultural practices, and herbicide resistance are factors that can contribute to weeds surviving the application of a herbicide. Symptomology may differ between the observations of low-level and high-level herbicide resistance. Confirming herbicide resistance early, when just a few weeds are present, and removing them by hand can decrease the spread of herbicide-resistant weeds, thereby reducing the costs required to manage them. Here is the current resistant weed situation in Ontario. There are 21 species of weeds within the province that have some level of herbicide resistance. The trend is, what we're seeing is that more species are becoming multiple resistant or resistant to more than one herbicide group. You can see Canada fleabane, lamb's quarters, eastern black nightshade, the pigweed species, and the ragweed species are all multiple resistant in various parts of the province of Ontario. So this is a very handy chart for you to keep on hand. So if you do come across a situation where a grower has sprayed a herbicide that should control the weed at the proper weed stage and timing, then maybe you should get it tested for herbicide resistance. So how do you get it tested for herbicide resistance? Well, since 2016, there have been 15 different genetic tests developed to rapidly diagnose herbicide-resistant weeds in the province. This is another handy table for you to keep on hand so that you know which species can be tested for herbicide resistance using genetic methods. So how do you collect samples for herbicide resistance testing? Basically, it's really easy. You just need to collect a quarter-size sample of leaf tissue and insert it in a tube or an envelope and put it into a bag with silica gel. You need samples from at least 10 plants in each field. Look for hot spots or areas where the weed was not controlled by a herbicide application. You can obtain these sample collection kits from me, Kristen O'Bee, and then send them back to me. All samples can be tested for free of charge. After you send the samples to me, they are sent to the lab, and basically that plant tissue is basically beaten up using a bead mill, and then the DNA is extracted using PCR so that we can determine if there's any changes in the genetic code to confer herbicide resistance in that species. Now, these samples, we can do them individually or we can pool them per field. And then you get a result back from the lab, which will come through me, and it will basically tell you whether or not the herbicide resistance test you were looking at came back positive or negative. Now, in some situations, growers are doing this on a field-by-field basis, in particular for new weed species called water hemp. Water hemp is resistant to 4 different groups of herbicides across the province, and so this will enable producers to determine which herbicides, modes of action, will still be able to kill water hemp. There are several resources that you can use to help you in your weed identification. One was just written in 2017. It's the Weed ID Guide for Ontario Crops. You can obtain this by searching for it in Google. It will take you to a website called Blurb where you can purchase it. Another resource for you and for the growers is the Guide to Weed Control for Horticultural Crops. This can be ordered from Publications Ontario, or you can go online and get a free PDF. And for any other questions or information regarding weed control in horticultural crops in the province of Ontario, please give me a call. There are several ways you can reach me by cell or text, by email, and through Twitter. Thanks for your time today, and I look forward to hearing from you. Bye for now.